Hi everybody, welcome to Tales from Around the World. I'm so excited to see you today, and I'm so excited that you decided to join us again this week. Our tale from around the world this week is about friendship, and it's about animals, which I love, and it's about a quest, and I really hope you enjoy it. But the first thing I want to tell you is that I need your help during this story. Now, as I told you before, I really love animals. And when I'm not at the theater directing or choreographing or dancing or teaching, where I am is at Shy Wolf Sanctuary, where I'm a volunteer, and I go there every Sunday and I help take care of the wolves and the panther and the bobcat and the foxes. And closer to home, I have my own cat, Blossom, who you may have seen running through Tales from Around the World, and you may see her today. I'd love to know from you. Please raise your hand. Do you have a cat? Okay, great. Do you have a dog? Raise your hand. All right. Do you have a fish? Do you have a guinea pig? Do you have a hamster? Do you have an alligator? Just kidding, I hope nobody has an alligator, but it is Florida, so one never knows, right? I want to introduce you to an animal friend of mine who I just met this week. But the thing is, he's very shy, and he may not agree to come out and see us. So I'd love for your help. His name is Leo. And on the count of 3, I would love for you to join me and say, Leo, come out and say hi. Ready? Can you help me? 1, 2, 3. Leo, come out and say hi. He says he won't. He's feeling too shy. But I'd love for you to meet him. So could we try again? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Leo, come out and say hi. What's that? You're still feeling too shy? Well, I'm gonna try going to get him and seeing if he'll come with me and say hello to you, all right? And while I'm away, I'm gonna count to 3, and I want you to shout, Leo, come out and say hi. Ready? Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Leo, come out and say hi. Leo, can you say hi to all of our friends? They all came to see you today. Huh? Yeah, that's a lot of people. But they wanted to say hello to you and welcome you to the world. We're going to tell a story today that's all about animals. That's right. And the story about animals, yeah, like you. Can you see yourself there? You're a lion. The story about animals takes place in a country in Eastern Europe that's called Hungary. Hungary? No, Hungary. I know you're hungry because you're always hungry, like all animals are always hungry, and many people are often always hungry. But this is the country of Hungary. And I want to tell you some facts about it. One is that there are big lakes and ponds and rivers, some of the biggest lakes in the world, and some of the highest mountains in the whole entire world are in Hungary. And they have an incredible culture there of cooking and dancing. And they invented 2 things that really impact our lives. And Leo, if you want to go listen to the story over here, I'd love to show our friends what those 2 things are that Hungarians invented, amongst many other things that affect certainly my life every single day. Okay? Okay? Can you wave goodbye? Say goodbye. Here we go. Hi. The first thing they invented, which certainly impacts my life, is the pen. So if you're ever using a pen and you're thinking to yourself, how did somebody come up with this great idea of having a pen that's not pen and ink, but that's all one thing, which makes life a lot less messy? It was Hungarians. The other incredible thing they invented is the spice. Paprika comes from Hungary. So if you've ever been eating like deviled eggs at a party and they have that red spice on them that's a little bit smoky, paprika. The story I'm going to tell you today has 3 animals in it. And whenever I say the name of that animal, I'd like to ask you to help me by making the sound that that animal makes. And the first animal is a mouse. So what kind of sounds do mice make? Yeah, they make like these little squeaks and like little scrabbles, and they sound kind of like. So I want to hear your best mouse sound on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, pretty good. The next animal is a bumblebee, right? A bumblebee. And we see bumblebees all the time, especially here in Florida. And they make like a buzzing sound, right? They make a sound that you can hear from their wings, and it's kind of like zzz, like a buzz. On 3, I want to hear your best bumblebee sound. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Sounds pretty good, all right? And the third one I've saved to last because it's one of my own favorite animals, which is of course the wolf. What does the wolf do? Yeah, they howl. And they howl because they're sending each other messages, and they can hear each other from very, very, very far away. And it's a magical thing to hear wolves howl. And we're gonna howl. We're gonna do it all together, because I don't wanna howl all by myself and have my friends make fun of me. So we're gonna howl all together on the count of 3. Ready? Best wolf howl that you got. 1, 2, 3. Oh, woo! Excellent. Our story begins on a summer day. It begins with 3 brothers. The 2 older brothers were really, really mean. And they were really jealous of their younger brother, whose name was Ferko. And they were jealous of him for all the wrong reasons. They were jealous of him because he was smart, and he was brave, and he was kind, and he was generous. And they also could have been smart and brave and kind and generous, but they didn't want to be. They didn't want to be. They wanted to be mean. So on the day our story begins, Ferko and his 2 brothers had decided to walk miles and miles and miles to the neighboring kingdom, where they had heard that there was the most beautiful princess and the most beautiful palace in the world. So they started their journey. And Ferko was kind of rushing ahead and coming back and checking in with his brothers and talking to them. And his brothers were grumbling. And they were saying, why is Ferko got everything? Why is he handsomer than us? Why is he kinder? Why is he braver? Why is he more generous? They were complaining. So they stopped to take a rest by a tree and to take a nap, because they'd been walking all day and it was very, very hot and sunny. And while Ferko fell asleep in the shade of the tree, his brothers sat up talking, and the conversation they had was really terrible. The one brother said to the other, you know, I just don't think it's fair that Ferko gets everything and we get nothing. And the other brother was like, yeah, Ferko gets everything and we get nothing. And then the other brother was like, well, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna just take his food, and we're just gonna leave him here. And let's see how well he does with no food. Miles and miles from home, miles and miles from the palace. And the other brother went, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. But then while they were talking, Ferko woke up, and he saw his brothers starting to take his backpack with all his food in it and like all his stuff for camping overnight. And he was like, wait, stop, what are you doing? Why are you taking all my food? And his brothers were like, you just stay here, and we just don't even care if you starve to death. And Pharaoh was saying, no, please don't leave me here to starve to death. And he ran after them, and he tried to get the bag back from them, and they started pulling it. It was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And finally, the bag dropped on the ground, and the stuff spilled out, and Pharaoh tried to gather it all up, but he couldn't fight because his brothers were 2 people, and he was only 1 person, and his brothers ganged up on him, and they kicked him in the leg, and they threw dirt in his face. So all of a sudden his leg really hurt, and he couldn't see out of either of his eyes, and as he was limping around and his eyes were hurting and he was in total agony, he just heard ba-boom, 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 the sound of his brothers taking off without him, taking all his food. And Pharaoh thought, what am I gonna do? He could barely walk. He was walking with a terrible limp, and he couldn't even see his way in front of him. He was trying to look around, and he had suddenly become like an old man because he couldn't move, and he couldn't see, and he was in total despair, and he collapsed in the road, and he started to cry. And then as he was crying, he heard 2 ravens talking. And the one raven said, "Oh, Hungary is a magical place. I'm so glad we landed here." And the other raven said, oh, why is that? And the first raven said, well, that's because they have magical water. And the other raven said, magical water, what does it do? And the other raven said, well, you know that pond right over there, if you dip your body in that pond, if you have a broken leg or bruises or anything, it just cures you. And that stream over there, if you dip your hand in it and put your hand in your face and put the water over your eyes, it restores your sight. And Pharaoh was listening to this conversation, and he thought, is this even possible? And so he walked over to the water, and he took it, and he put it over his eyes, not even believing it was possible. And he could see. And he felt a lot better now that he could see, even though his legs still hurt really badly. So he limped over to the lake, and he thought, well, maybe if that water over there helped my eyes, maybe the lake will help my leg. And so he limped over to the lake, and slowly, because his body hurt so much, slowly, he got into the lake. And immediately, he was good as new. Now, nothing in the world puts you in a better mood than feeling good. And so Pharaoh didn't feel quite as despairing as before. He was still really sad about his brothers and this cruel thing that they did to him. But he was like, I'm going to go forward. You know, I'm going to go forward. I'm going to go to the palace. I'm going to find the princess, and I'm going to get there. So he started walking, and he was kind of hungry, but he found some berries by the side of the road, and he'd had something to drink at the lake, and so that was all right too. And then as he was walking, he heard this funny buzzing sound, and it was the sound of the bee, and the sound went like what? Yeah. But he noticed that there was something really funny about it. The bumblebee was flying, but at every few feet it kept falling, so it looked kind of like this. And Pharaoh went up, and he held out his hand, and the bumblebee landed on his hand, and it was trembling. It was trembling, and he saw that its wing was very damaged. And Pharaoh said to the bumblebee, well, I'll take you back to this amazing lake. I'll take you back to this lake, and it will heal your wing. And the bumblebee said, okay. So Pharaoh went all the way back to the lake, carrying the bumblebee in his hand, and he very gently rested the bumblebee on the lake's surface, and immediately the bumblebee's wing was restored, and it flew normally again. And the bumblebee said, thank you so very much. I will let you know if I can ever, ever, ever repay your kindness. And Ferko said, you're so welcome. I couldn't see a poor injured creature without helping it. And zzz, the bumblebee flew off. Then he had to retrace his steps. He got some more berries from the bush at the side of the road. He retraced his steps. He was walking and walking and walking and walking. And he began to hear the sound of a mouse. What sound did it make? Good. Yeah, it made like a scrabbly, 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 squeaky sound, like a kind of sound. But at the same time, he saw that something was really wrong with the mouse. Because the mouse was going in all directions. The mouse didn't seem to know where it was going at all. Usually mice are very clear and very directional, but this mouse was just all over the place. And Ferko knelt down and he said to the mouse, "Are you lost?" And the mouse looked up at him and he saw that its eyes were completely covered with mud. And it couldn't see at all, and maybe had not been able to see for a very long time. And Ferko said, can't you see me? And the mouse said, no, I can't see you. And Ferko said to the mouse, well, that's okay. I'm going to take you to this stream that will restore your sight. Will you come and sit in my hand? And the mouse smelled its way over to his hand because it could smell the berries that he'd been eating. And he brought the mouse over to the stream. And the mouse dipped its little head in the water and it could see. And the mouse said, "Thank you so much. If there's ever any way I can repay you, I'll be so glad to." And it ran off into the fields. And then Ferko had to retrace his steps again, and he was walking and walking and walking and walking and walking. And then he heard these heavy, heavy footfalls. And he heard a howl. And how did the howl go? Yeah. And Ferko backed up because he was afraid of a wolf. And he backed way, 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 way up. And again, he heard these heavy footfalls. But then he realized that the wolf was limping and that one of its back legs was horribly, horribly twisted. And Ferko came forward very cautiously because he was afraid of the wolf. And he said, "I can help you. There's a lake that mends injuries." And the wolf went, "Can you help me? Well, if you can help me, please lead me to the lake immediately, for I'm in great pain." And Ferko said, oh yes, I can help you." And he lost his fear, and very, very slowly, he and the wolf walked back together towards the lake. And as soon as the wolf dove down into the water, his leg was fine. And the wolf said, "Thank you so much. If there's ever any way I can repay your kindness, please tell me." Oh! And he ran off to join all of his wolf friends. And then Ferko ran and ran and ran and ran, but he couldn't catch up with his new friend, the wolf, again. And he ran and ran, and he started to get tired. But he kept going. He kept going. He walked through the night. He walked through the next morning. And then in front of him, he saw a beautiful, incredible palace. And standing in the window on the very topmost tower, who do you think he saw? Of course, the most beautiful princess in the world. And Ferko waved to her, and she cautiously waved back to him. And Ferko had no fear now, because he had survived a broken leg, and he had survived losing his sight, and he had helped all these creatures, so he just walked into the palace. Walked into the palace. And the king said to him, "Who do you think you are?" And he said, "Well, I'm Ferko, and I've had great adventures, and now I want to marry the princess." And the king said, "No, absolutely not." And coming back from behind the king came two young men. And yes, you've already guessed who they are. They were Ferko's older brothers, who had been telling the king what a terrible, terrible person Ferko was. And the king said, "Your brothers have said a thing or two to me about you. They're not best pleased with you. They say that you're cruel, that you use dark magic, that you're unkind, and that you're not smart." And Pharaoh said, "Those things aren't true. That's not true at all." And the king said, "Oh, is that so? Well, then if you want to win my daughter's hand, tonight you must build a palace that is more beautiful than the palace that I have built here. Now out." And Pharaoh left, and he felt total despair, because how in the world was he going to build a palace in one night? They take centuries to build. And so he went to lie down in a field, and he was fretting and thinking, and he heard the bee, and the bee made the sound of, yes, the sound of the buzzing. And his friend the bumblebee came over, and landed on his finger, and the bumblebee said, "What's bothering you, Pharaoh?" And Pharaoh said, "Well, to win the princess, I have to build a castle overnight, but how could I possibly do that?" And the bee said, "Thank you so much for rescuing me. Just leave it to me. You go to sleep and wake up tomorrow and see what you will see." And Pharaoh went to sleep, and he woke up, and he saw the most amazing sight. There was a palace that was even more grand than the king's palace. The bees had all come together. All the bees in the whole entire kingdom had come together, and overnight they'd built a palace. And the king looked at it, and he was not very happy at all. He said, "Well, you may have built a palace overnight, but you know what I don't think you can do? I don't think you could gather every single piece of corn in the entire kingdom and put them together into a big pile in the middle of a field overnight. Could you? Could you?" And Pharaoh again was terrified. And he left, and he went to sit in the same field thinking, how will I do this? Who could pick every ear of corn in a kingdom over an entire season, let alone overnight? Just as he was despairing, he heard the sound of a mouse. And what sound did it make? Yeah. I mean, like, and the mouse said, "Oh, Pharaoh, why do you look so sad?" And Pharaoh said, "Well, I'm supposed to gather every single ear of corn in the entire kingdom and pile them in the middle of a field overnight. How will I possibly do it?" And the mouse said, "Oh, you leave it to me. You go to sleep, and tomorrow you wake up and you will see what you will see." And the mouse skittered off. And Pharaoh went to sleep. And he woke up. And you've guessed it. In the middle of a field was all this piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of corn. And the mouse had gotten all of her mice friends together. And in the night, all the mice had gone all over the kingdom and gathered every single ear of corn and piled them beautifully in the middle of the field. And the king, again, was not very pleased. And the king said, "Well, you may be able to build palaces, you may be able to gather corn in a field, but you know what I bet you'll never be able to do? Gather every wolf in the kingdom. I'd like to see you try that without dying. And again, Pharaoh felt terrible despair, and he went into the field, and he was sitting with his head in his hands, and he heard a very low voice. And it was his friend, the wolf, and the wolf said, "Is something bothering you?" And Pharaoh said, "Yes, I've been told to build a palace and to gather a whole field of corn, and now I'm supposed to gather all the wolves in the world?" And the wolf said, "No problem. Leave it to me. You just go to sleep now, and tomorrow we will see what we will see." Oh! And the wolf took off. The next morning, Pharaoh woke up, and he didn't see that the world had changed at all. So he went to the king, and he said, "You're right. My friends helped me build a palace, and my friends helped me put all the corn in the middle of a field, but I couldn't gather all the wolves." And as he was finished talking, they heard a step. and then another step, and another step. And they turned around, and stretching as far as the eye could see were wolves of every color. There were gray wolves, and white wolves, and black wolves. And they all, at the same time, threw their heads back. They made the most incredible The king didn't like this at all. The king said, "You wolves, get away, get away, get away." Well, I don't know if you know wolves, but they don't like being told to go away. And so the wolves came forward. And they came forward. And they came forward, and they came forward, and they came forward, and they came forward, and they said, "We are not going anywhere. We are Ferko's friends, and now this is his kingdom." And they chased away the king, and they chased away Ferko's brothers, and they chased away all the people that had been mean to Ferko. They did not chase away the princess. And the princess and Ferko were married, and they became the king and the queen of the kingdom, and all the wolves, and all the bees, and all the mice came to celebrate with them. Thank you so much for joining me for another Tales from Around the World, and I'll see you next week.